Stormwind's next crisis will be centered around one man, Anduin. Few know how much trouble he's truly in right now, and the heartache that is going to await him. Now, when Marion died, two men stepped in to become Anduin's advisors. Velen, his spiritual guide, and Gen. Of course, we talked about him recently. Anduin's well-meaning but sort of hot-headed uncle-like figure. Any worries Gen would have had over Anduin being a light-loving soft boy will have obviously dissipated when Anduin led his kingdom through the Fourth War. During that time, Gen was even made regent of the kingdom, while Anduin was off on diplomatic missions, even heir. But Gen pushed for a permanent solution, an actual line of succession. Gen didn't want the alliance to fall into the wrong hands. Anduin also didn't want to marry his daughter, but that's another story. Of course, the war ended, and longtime Alliance hero Turalyon was appointed commander of the army for the express purpose of hunting down Sylvanas. And then Anduin was taken away. Not only is this a disaster for Azeroth, but it also created a succession crisis in the kingdom. There needed to be somebody on the throne, so to solve this, as we've talked about, the House of Nobles made Turalyon regent. So, what's going to happen when the king returns, but he's no longer himself? Simply, what's going to happen is what could be one of the best Alliance storylines we've ever had. And if you're like me, you're absolutely going to need today's sponsor, GlassesUSA.com, in order to read the novels. Look, I've needed glasses. I've never liked shopping for glasses. The whole thing is an overpriced hassle. Come on, glasses wearers, we know what it's like. But not so with GlassesUSA.com, because by cutting out the middleman, they are able to offer prescription glasses at up to 70% off. And if you click my link down below, you will get a great offer and free shipping. Now, for me, it's hard to know what glasses work, and that's why their virtual mirror feature is just awesome. You combine that with their massive range of glasses, and it's a lot easier than going into the local store and trying on a few pairs and just getting confused. Oh, and they've even got an app that scans your current glasses and tells you what your prescription is. Super handy if you, like me, lose your prescription card. Now, what's been great is getting a bunch of glasses to cover all my bases. You've seen these. These are the rimless ones that I love. They're just great because, they're rimless. The rim to get in your way. I really like this style. Of course, though, to deal with blue light, I've got these blue light guys. These are awesome, really good for screen use. And then, sunglasses, shades. Never really had much of them before, but I've got these two pairs of shades, and then these, where I was able to get a shade covering on the actual lenses themselves, and their prescription. So I really went from not being covered to being totally covered in next to no time. So, GlassesUSA.com, they are the place to go. You'll get a special offer from my link in the description below, and the whole thing is risk-free with a 100% money-back guarantee. So, thanks to them for sponsoring. On with these rimless bad boys, and let's get into the video. If you've watched our previous video discussing Gen, and hopefully you have, then you will know of the tension between Shaw and Turalyon. And when we think about the state of Anduin when he returns, well, is he really going to go straight to the throne? That's not even when we count things like the Whispers of Il'gynoth, like this.
The Golden One claims a vacant throne.
I mean, that's pretty clearly Turalyon, and when the line continues, you really see it.
The crown of light will bring only darkness.
The crown. So, as in his crown, the crown of Stormwind that he's basically wearing, or the crown of the Triumvirate, which is a item aboard the Vindicar that superpowered it. Or could it mean the crown in a depersonalized way, as in, the crown, king, and kingdom, all one and the same, that the actions of the crown will bring darkness? Well, you know what, it's kind of splitting hairs at that point. It all leads to Turalyon is being teased to be real bad news. So let's puzzle out what's going to happen. If standard World of Warcraft expansion rules happen, then Anduin will be gone for 1 to 2 years. And during that time, he'll have went through an intense process of being dominated. So look what domination did to Arthas and Sylvanas, as people. He even speaks of himself slipping away at the end of patch 9.1. There will be long-term consequences, so let's work out what that's going to look like. What's Anduin's destiny? There's a few options. Some think that Anduin could even become an antagonist. You know, Arthas, but different, a more overt victim, but still someone turned cruel. More likely, though, I think Anduin returns to Azeroth and has to go on a journey, both physical and mental, to basically come to terms with what has happened to him. Anduin is not an undead, but it does seem that the darkening of the soul that is associated with undeath is very much happening to him. I mean, just listen to these lines.
Is this what you felt when Arthas raised you, Sylvanas? Hollow, empty, everything you once were, consumed by darkness.
Yes, young lion. But in the end, the sacrifices we've made will have been worth it.
His person is essentially being replaced with darkness. He's going to lose who he is, and he thinks that by the time Zovaal wins, there'll pretty much be nothing left. Now, this flashback occurred just before the Sanctum of Domination, and by that time, Anduin really had not been dominated for long, had he? Only since the start of 9.1's events. Surely, he's at best, right now, only halfway through his journey. And all that means is that this darkness that he feels is going to grow a lot. Now, thinking about Anduin, back in MoP, yeah, he was an idealist, but he was also a risk taker, you know? He did some pretty ballsy stuff. So what happens if that light and that goodness, well, gets corrupted and turned dark? When he still has that zest for action, but his ideals are eroded by darkness, could he do bad things? Well, if Anduin returns to the throne, he's going to be a changed man. In that cutscene, he says that he hopes his friends will remember who he was. And that means that Anduin is preparing for the worst. And I think this line also paves the way for politics. Because what if the House of Nobles and Turalyon no longer believe he is fit to rule? Anduin will not be in a state to defend himself. It will indeed come down to his friends remembering who he was. And that directly could spark tensions between Jaina, Gen, Shaw, Velen, and the current political establishment of Stormwind. And that's the thing, inner conflict is nothing new to Anduin. We saw him casually use both light and void in Pandaria. In Shadows Rising, a moment of anger saw him torture an innocent with the void, and the author was specifically told to include that scene by Blizz. Really, Anduin is the best way for Blizzard to deliver that technical cosmic lore, but through actual character growth in a way that people will really enjoy and appreciate. So this turmoil, while painful, it will position Anduin to have a unique perspective and to better understand the likes of Turalyon and Sylvanas, people somewhat enamored by a cosmic force. Look, if they do this well, then we could have something like PTSD Korra from Season 4, and I am all for a story like that being told. BFA tested his leadership, Shadowlands put him through trauma, and I think 10.0 is going to test the essence of Anduin's being. It's funny then that the light will almost certainly play a very much more mixed than normal role in all of this. Stormwind is under the control of a man who, as we've talked about in this channel, has spent a few decades in Azeroth, and then a full 1,000 years crusading with a fanatical army. Turalyon is, as far as we're concerned, a perfect stranger, and now he's effectively our king. Now, we got hints to the kind of king Turalyon would be in Shadows Rising. There's a lot more depth in this in our Turalyon video, but basically he justified Ilaria torturing a non-combatant orc for information because she had been harboring an agent of Sylvanas, which is actually a mischaracterization of what that individual was really doing. There was no evidence of harboring, and it feels like Turalyon was just saying whatever he could to maintain his self-image as a good guy. He has a lot of hatred in deep. At the end of the book, Matthias Shaw is captured by the Horde. Now this is in the wake of the Armistice, remember that. And sort of understandably, Turalyon wants to basically blow the horns of war and kickstart the battle for Azeroth again. You can understand why he'd want a bit of vengeance, but in the wake of an armistice, really? Of course, Jaina talks him down, but Turalyon still does seem to be trigger happy with the Alliance military. Again, not a huge problem in this setting, but it's clearly not the path Anduin would have chosen before domination. It's not how Anduin would have acted whatsoever. It was also Jaina who talked Turalyon down. She'll also have been gone for 2 years. So what do you think Turalyon will do without these powerful personalities like her to keep him in check? Opposition to Turalyon would not be a surprising thing. I imagine the Night Elves would feel a little bit odd about aspects of this whole fanatic thing. There's then the Prophet Velen. Steve Denuser told me this directly, that Velen is significantly more skeptical of the light, owing to what he saw in patch 7.3. So he'll be suspicious. When push comes to shove, Gen will obviously back up Anduin, as will Jaina. Given their different yet similar predicaments, I then must wonder about Kalia Menethil. Now, will push come to shove? That's the question. Well, after the battle for Azeroth, Turalyon expressed interest in reclaiming some Old Alliance holdings. Other than that, he'll have reigned over a time of armistice, of basically peace and rebuilding. And that means that he probably will have the House of Nobles on his side, and also the masses, who will have been tired of war. So looking outward, there's also a lot of stuff developing in Lordaeron, his home. Again, that's parts of the Old Alliance. I could see Turalyon launching an invasion to reclaim it. What would the reformed Silver Hand or Argent Dawn do? What would that feel like? Could Turalyon actually end up having a bit more in common with the resurgent yet bonkers Scarlet Brotherhood? Well, that might be a bit much, but he'd certainly be more sympathetic than Anduin. And this all brings us to the ultimate fear, a light invasion from AU Draenor, but you know we've talked about that at length on the channel, so it doesn't bear repeating. Remember, though, how Turalyon first reacted to Aloncius Fowl? We talked about that earlier. You know, he essentially sniffed the stench of undeath on his soul, and he kind of felt violent thoughts about it. That's how the light feels when it sees something that breaks its orthodoxy. So with that being established, how would Turalyon, Yrel, or a Light Mother react to this new Anduin, with this scar on his soul? I mean, at best, would Turalyon want to help Anduin the boy, but also not really feel comfortable with him having the keys of power? Now, okay, to be fair for Turalyon, there have been bits of character development between him and Illyria, and indeed his loyalty to humanity is almost certainly still intact. So, I think that ultimately, when the dice truly have been thrown, much of Turalyon will want to support Azeroth against any invasion, even the Light. But I think with some of the weird warnings we've got, I just have to wonder what damage will be done before Turalyon realizes that his side is in the wrong. All this brings us on to the future of the kingdom. I think there is crisis in Stormwind's future, and Blizzard have very much led us to thinking this. This tension around the throne between Anduin, Turalyon, Gan, Shaw, perhaps even Velen, it's only going to serve the wider disintegration of the Alliance. Tyrande will have gone through her own big crazy journey in the Shadowlands, and I think is another unpredictable player in this emerging storyline. I really feel that this actually could all lead to some amazing storytelling, and I know I've been critical of them lately, but I think this stuff could be great. We here believe that Blizzard basically need to take the story away from overarching faction dominance and bring it back to the more fundamental ties. You know, let the Alliance not be a mono-faction with a High King. Let's treat the peoples of Azeroth not as Alliance or Horde, but as their actual distinct groups, and really dive into what it means being in these factions in this world. And really, I think that's why so many people have loved the Horde for so long. They're not monolithic. They're all different. They've all got their own stories. Well, I think that Alliance tension would be the perfect way to explore what is, remember, I am essentially a lifelong Alliance player and I'm still going to say it, the more dull of the two factions. Orgrimmar's had its 2 sieges, let's give Stormwind one. Let's have the Horde rally to our aid, right? Back up our rebels. Work with our special forces. And honestly, after diving into the city-state politics of Final Fantasy XIV, I am ready to see that level of story in WoW. And Anduin is absolutely the man for the job. He's got it all. He has a perfect claim to the throne. He also has reasons why well, the political people wouldn't really want him. And if you look at actual history, I mean, how many times have a bunch of pissed off nobles and money people wanted to get rid of a ruler, even if their claim is legitimate? Because at the end of the day, money talks, right? There's all of these forces, all these things whirling around Anduin, and I think that is why Blizzard is keeping Anduin at arm's length and also putting him through so much trauma. It's so whenever Anduin returns to the story as a character that we see and interact with in a very, very regular way, it's just so that he's going to be incredibly motivated, with a lot going on, with us truly understanding what he's went through, and basically a situation where the heroes of the Shadowlands, so Jaina, Thrall, Bane, whenever he stands up, us, that we'll understand Anduin, and we'll understand that no, he'll get over this, he should be on the throne, but that we will actually clash with the powers that be at home. I think it's going to be really cool. So, there's that. I want to say thank you to GlassesUSA.com for sponsoring today's video. As you can see, you can get a bunch of absolutely fantastic glasses for your prescription. Real easy, real convenient, so hit up the link down below. A big thanks to them for supporting the channel as well. A lot of lore content supported by Glasses USA, so cheers to them. Thank you to you for watching this video. And with that said, have a great day. I'll see you next time.